Welcome to episode 3 of Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgianna.
Welcome. So before we get started on our topics today, we're going to do a body-based connection practice as always. And today we're going to take an exercise from Shirzad Shamin's Positive Intelligence. This is really helpful practices that you can Google if you want to, or send us a message. So the practice is just to sit quietly. I think because this is what we say all the time, I'm going to have you start by feeling your bum on the chair. Add that in. Close your eyes if you're comfortable and just connect your fingertips. Rub one finger up against the other. You're going to do this with such focus and intention that you can feel your fingerprints rubbing up against each other. And just take a minute to feel the texture, the pressure of your fingers, and the warmth. And let that be your focus for a moment. And just come back and notice how your body feels. As always, we do this to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and the space around us. How you doing, Gigi?
I'm doing well. That felt really good. I feel really peaceful. And I was surprised because I could feel more of my fingerprint ridges than I have been able to in the past. And I think that's just through practice, right? Mm-hmm. Or I could feel like the ridges on these ridges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On my fingers more than the actual fingerprints. And I think just honing that sensory awareness has meant that I notice. I'm like, oh, I had a little internal giggle of, oh, look what I noticed today that I've never noticed before.
So how's mom life today? How's momming for you?
Momming for me today is very peaceful because they're with their dad. However, a really cool moment I had yesterday was their dad took them on vacation. And it's super snowy here, like really snowy. And I, of course, have mom worries of, are they going to be safe? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to make it to their destination?
Where are they going?
They went to the Sunshine Coast, so not far.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it was really snowy out and the highways were all icy. And my oldest is 12. He has a cell phone. And so he has Find My Phone. So I'm like, let me just track them and see where they are. So that gave me a little relief. Okay, their car is still moving. That's a good sign. But what was cool was I texted their dad at some point. I said, did you get on the ferry? And he said, yes, we did. Great. And then a couple hours later, he texted me, like without me asking, without me prompting. He said, I just want you to know we got here safe. And not only was that a warming moment for me because I knew they were safe, but I was like, we've worked really hard to create this co-parenting relationship where we do our best to put our kids first and what they need first and like each other first, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't be good parents, and we support each other in that. But that was just a really sweet, tender moment because I'm like, this feels really good to have the father of my children be willing and see the importance of just letting me know they're okay. Mm-hmm. And I know that not every co-parenting situation gets to be that peaceful because there's so many factors that impact people's well-being and their ability to work together. I also know that there's a lot of times where we can do better as parents to put aside our stuff and take that to our adult people who we trust to get that stuff out so that we can bring a more compassionate self to the other parent for the sake of our kids. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but I do feel deeply passionate about trying our best to be able to do that. and that if you don't have a dynamic co-parenting in the way that you'd love, that there's still little baby steps we can take. So that was a proud moment.
That's big. Managing yourself so that you can bring your best self to whatever the situation is, as a co-parent, as a parent, as a friend, as a lover, whatever.
Yeah, it's a big thing for me. It was something that, watching my parents fight so much when I was a child and feeling the impacts of that, I knew I wanted to change that generational pattern. And it takes work and practice and intention to grow that ability to regulate myself so that I can bring a more curious-minded, open-hearted part of me to those interactions.
So you had this big, like, loud home life, it sounds. And you could say that your ex, your baby daddy, your ex-husband, is quite mild-mannered. He's certainly, I can't picture him yelling. Has he ever yelled?
No,
Does
and
he
I
yell
think
in Dutch?
He does not yell in Dutch. He doesn't yell. This is also a thing to note. I realize I have the luxury of dealing with someone who's a pretty well-regulated person. And not everybody has that luxury to co-parent with someone who's very well-regulated or takes that as an important self-responsibility.
So knows what it feels like. Like, that's a huge deal, to feel regulated, to feel comfortable with somebody who's regulated. It's pretty normal to feel uncomfortable to be regulated because we're so unused to it.
Yeah. No, he's not really a yeller, but I wouldn't say we haven't always seen eye to eye on parenting. I think, you knowing who I am, I put a lot of intentional thought into how I want to parent. And I think he's less inclined to do that. And I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, it's just different. And so I found that in our parenting, co-parenting dynamic, there's often me who brings up, hey, I'd love to handle it this way, or that way that it was handled, like, it concerns me a bit because X, Y, Z. Would you be open to trying it this way? So that's more of sort of the stuff we're working with, trying to be on the same page. But
is that something you knew going in? I don't actually know if you guys planned to have kids or not, but if you did, I'm curious if this is something you knew going in, that you were going to be intentional in ways that he wasn't.
We did plan on having kids. I think just our natures are very different. Like, I take this intentional piece into pretty much everything that I do. And he's wired differently. He makes really great choices as well, but he gets to them in a really different way. I don't know his way, but I definitely could see this dynamic even before we had kids, that I would wonder why he did things a certain way. And we would have conversations and he'd be like, I don't know, just do it that way. Okay. Just different. And I think back then I was so young when we met and when we got married. I definitely think I had judgment, about that seems dumb. Why would you not be intentional about why you do things? And over time, I think one thing I'm really proud of, and it's really necessary as a mother, especially now that my kids are 12 and 10, is to be able to let go of thinking that my way is the only way and the right way.
Ooh, yeah, we need all the ways.
We need all the ways. And that was a hard thing for me to shift out of, because growing up, it was my dad's way is the right and it's the only way. And so I learned that it's always very black and white.
And you'll get thrown to the wolves and if you don't do it the right way, right? That's really fundamental biological threat right there.
So what I realized is I was caught up in this vicious cycle because I grew up with the framework, there's only one right way. I also grew up with the belief it is horrible to be wrong. You never want to be wrong. And being wrong holds so much shame. And that makes it very difficult to have human relationships that are true and authentic.
What happens if you're wrong?
Oh, if I was wrong, you would either just not get listened to or you would get yelled at. It just wasn't pleasant. So I just carried this belief that if you love someone, like this is distorted, but true. If you love someone, you must agree. If you love someone, you must think the same way. And I took that into my relationships and didn't really feel fun.
Very relatable. Yeah.
Now, especially, I've known from a very early time, I think even before I had kids, I wanted to be a parent who would be able to apologize. Because growing up, I never heard my parents apologize to each other or to me. If they did apologize, it was after me like just really poking at them for a long time, really helping them. I don't even know if it's called helping them, but really drilling my point at them. And then it was finally they'd relent and be like, okay, I'm sorry. But I never heard genuine, generous apologies that weren't provoked or demanded. And I knew I wanted to do that differently with my kids. And when they're young, it felt easier. Oh, sorry, that was mama. Or, oops, sorry, did that scare you? I used a bit of a loud voice. I was feeling frustrated. I'm sorry. I practice taking a moment for myself before I come talk to you. That was easier to do when they were little. Now that my oldest is 12 and he's just as opinionated as his mama. And sometimes
he's more opinionated than his mama, wouldn't you say?
He's more comfortable saying out loud his opinion than his mama. Right. So he teaches me a lot. But I've really had to catch myself in moments where I like cut him off. Like not intentionally, sometimes intentionally because I'm like, oh, I just don't want to hear what he has to say because I'm going to have to say no anyways. I'm trying to shortcut the situation. And then he'll say to me, Mom, can't you just let me say what I want to say? And then in that moment, I just feel it. Even saying that out loud right now, I feel it. And I remember what it was like being a child who always felt like I couldn't say what I wanted to say. And then I settle and I feel my feet on the ground and I'm like, you know what? You're right. What is it that you want me to hear? And I try. And sometimes I can't in that moment. Sometimes I'm just so fired up that I'm like, no, go to bed or whatever it is. And what I've really tried to practice is going back and finding him after the fact. Hey, I didn't do a very good job at listening there. Or, hey, I really didn't handle myself in a way that felt good. I'm sorry about that. And it's not always easy, right? Coming from the blueprint that I came from my parents of it's very shameful to be wrong. You never want to apologize. That's not an easy thing for me to do with my like intimate partner people, with my children. It's just more emotional. It's with those people. And yet I'm really proud of myself that it's something I'm trying to be very intentional about and go back and do. And what's really interesting, do you want to say something? I can tell.
Yeah, it's partly because you're like the emotional stuff that comes up there is because you're so intentional about it and you're actually trying to genuinely understand the other person. Like you're really there to feel compassionately what's going on for them. So your apologies are not from a place of I was bad and wrong and I'm shaming myself into apologizing right now to try to make you like me again. It's a genuine, I understand where you were coming from and I can feel what that pain must have been like and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it feels really good to be practicing that kind of an apology. It's really true. It's very genuine. I wait until I really feel it. Like I feel that I'm sorry, not like I think I should apologize or like, shit, I fucked that up. I really feel in my bones like that is not how I wanted to handle it. I see the pain that I caused. I really want to offer a repair.
I'm curious when you say that, because you take your time, like in a really beautiful way that I think a lot of people, especially people who run a lot of anxiety, would feel really uncomfortable with. So I'm curious how it feels for you. Do you feel any pressure of, I need to apologize quickly, I need to repair this immediately? How does that run in your body?
There's different modes. So there's a, man, that sucks. I wish I didn't say that. And then, okay, that's okay. Just got to repair. And then there's like pride and ego that comes. That's no. I don't want to apologize. And then the other voice is like, yeah, what's true? The true deeper feeling is I don't want this to be in between us. It doesn't feel good. And I'm not proud of how I dealt with that. So I want to address that. I don't want my son in this example, I don't want him carrying that because that was me bringing pain to that situation that didn't need to be there. So I think more than anything, I just want in that kind of moment, I just want him to know that like my words I used with him, like that was like my stuff. That has nothing to do with him. And I want him to know that in that moment. That was me and my frustration and how I chose in that moment to handle it, not a reflection of you and what you were doing and what you were trying to help me understand. And it's interesting because I guess we're talking about apologies today. A while ago, I decided to look at my patterns with apologizing. And I saw that for many years, I had a very hard time apologizing in intimate relationship, in partnership. And I was like, okay, I think that's something I need to practice. Then I thought, I'm like, is this how I've always been with apologizing? And that wasn't actually true. It wasn't reflective of all my relationships. And what I realized was when it was a friend or it was a teacher, it was someone like an acquaintance, someone out in the world, someone not my family, I'd be the first person to apologize. I was like, what is up with that? I wanted to understand. And what I realized is I also conditioned myself to apologize quickly with friends and teachers and acquaintances and strangers and neighbors because I wanted to be liked. I didn't want to risk that connection would be ruptured or that there would be conflict. And it wasn't that apology wasn't true or genuine or real. It was that panic you talked about just now. There was that panic with those people of, oh, I better make sure they know I'm sorry, that I was wrong. That was me. Whereas with family, I grew up believing you never apologize, never admit you're wrong because you'll be slammed hard and you'll have to pay for that. So don't be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This came up for me this week. What do I want to say about this? I recently bought a house with a friend. We have never lived together. Neither of us has lived with anyone for a while. So we're figuring all kinds of things out. And we do this inner work together in the same groups. So we're quite aware of what's happening and we're quite aware of what we're not yet willing to face, or parental patterns, family patterns, and family members coming here and that being like active and real in our lives. So we've set aside time weekly to have a house meeting. And housemate Julie found this format from, I think, people she follows on TikTok or something. They have a weekly meeting where it's a nice format where what are some celebrations for the week? What are some challenges? What are some things we should talk about? And then like practical stuff like money and whatever. And we were just going through the by rote things. And then it became an emotional meeting. We started really being present and asking each other these questions and feeling things that came up and recognizing how our family patterns are coming up in our living situation together. And it's because we made that intentional space in which you could perhaps apologize or bring up a problem that so much of that is actually going to happen. How many times have you wanted to say something or wanted to apologize to somebody, but the right time doesn't come up and then it just gets weird and you just don't? So creating a space in which to ask for apologies or with which to apologize is, I think, super huge for me. So it's funny because I noticed that she had this way that in my mind, in my family system, in my experience, she was making comments that to me I thought were passive aggressive, and I made it mean that she didn't like me and all these things and that she didn't like this and that. And in her world, it just is something different, you know. But we knew enough to be able to bring these things up to each other. So she did something that I felt hurt by, and then we cleared it. Like that night, we cleared it in our meeting. And then the very next day, I did the exact same thing to her, exactly the same. And I noticed it in the moment, but it wasn't the right time to bring it up. But then luckily we had another meeting, so I was able to apologize. Yes, it's a very different brand of apology than I would have been able to offer someone before when I was apologizing to save my life or to save my relationship or to save face or to avoid shame or whatever. Apologizing because you really feel it and because you love someone and want to connect and extend is really nice.
It is a really beautiful thing to also know the difference and to give yourself time to slowly practice doing that, because it's not easy. I'm curious about what you said. You said we had this house meeting and then we cleared it. So I know what you mean by that.
Oh,
because
yes.
we've been doing this work together, but what does that mean? Like if I'm listening, I'm like, oh, they just pressed a button, cleared it, done, went away.
Delete. Yes. It's an energetic button. It is honesty about how you feel and what you're afraid of, basically. It's saying, here's a thing that happened that hurt me. It's generally what we're trying to get at when we talk about nonviolent communication. The format of when this happened, I felt such and such a way, and what I need is X, Y, or Z. It's the fundaments of that. It's letting people know how you're feeling and what you need. It's being honest about your feelings. It's probably bursting into tears. It's not standard practice, you know?
What that reminds me of is it's really just showing someone what's going on with us. Yeah. Like the visual that I have is like, my heart is here. It feels hurt. And I'm willing just to open it up, slide the doors open. And like you see that it's a little bit bruised right now.
Yeah.
And
I'm laughing because it looks like you're opening a trench coat seductively if you're watching us. Yeah. Here's my heart in my trench coat.
But this is what I notice is we come back to that root of, if I'm aware of how I feel and what I need, the rest just flows. It's
nobody needs to do anything. The energy has moved. You've been witnessed in your experience. You've been allowed to have your experience without argument or interruption. And the other person doesn't need to do anything. The energy, this is why it's a clearing, is because you're clearing your energy about a situation. One of the beautiful things about energy clearing is that you can do this by yourself in writing or spoken. You can do it with a partner. You can do it and should do it often, not with the person that you need to clear the energy about. This is part of the ownership work, is that we're clearing our own energy and our own thoughts about a situation. And that can actually give us a feeling of clarity without needing to involve anybody else.
That was one of the most powerful practices that I learned, right? That anger process that we did, something I'm angry at you for, or sorry, I think it began with something I want you to know is. Like that prompt in itself is so powerful, because how often do we just carry all that stuff that I want you to know, but we don't know how to say it, or we think they don't care, or we think it doesn't matter. but it's like festering inside of us, and it has this weight, this heavy emotional weight. So being able to say something I want you to know is, and see just what comes out after that, for me is so illuminating of all the stuff that I'm carrying inside that I'm not always even aware of. And then to be able to follow that up with something, I'm angry at you. For someone who grew up not being allowed to feel angry, thinking that anger was terrible and wrong, I remember the first time I was presented with that prompt, I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm fine, but I love you. So I can't possibly have anything I feel angry about you with you. And that was so powerful. And then to bring that after that, I think the prompt we used after that was something I see in you that I see in myself. That's really gross. That was really hard to do. I'm like, I am not like you at all. I'm pissed at you, right? And then to end with the visual of the forgiveness is so powerful. And these are prompts we worked with for many years from our teacher, Phil. And I used to think that you got to keep everything inside, and the other alternative is to blast it on the other person. There's no other alternative. It never occurred to me that I could just sit by myself or with someone who I love and trust and have them just witness me in my expression of all of these things, just to clear it out.
Yeah. Even that is advanced, I'm going to say. It's pretty normal for people to just lock down in that. The prompt is, well, something I want you to know. That can be confusing for people too, but something I'm angry at you for, it's pretty normal for people to just go, I can't go near that. And they forget the prompt. They can't come up with anything. And so being present with what there is and being able to unload it on a partner or a journal is advanced.
Yeah. And it's life-changing. I remember, I think we used to get 2 minutes a prompt, and that felt like forever. And then we graduated, if you want to call it that, 10 minutes. And I remember getting to the point where speaking about something I'm angry at someone, 10 minutes felt really easy. But then it became just as easy to speak about for 10 minutes about something I appreciated about someone who I was also feeling angry with.
Yes.
And that was like mind blowing to me. Like, how can I possibly have any appreciation for you if I'm pissed at you? Yeah. And that was, I think, another thing that got in the way of my apologies in the past, because I thought that if I brought any kindness, if I brought any compassion, if I could see your point in any way, or if I appreciated you for any one thing that you did that was helpful in that whole mix of things, I would be essentially saying you're off the hook and what you did was okay. Yeah. So I was like, I cannot possibly tell someone who I'm angry at them. If I'm angry at them, I can't possibly say, I also love you and I appreciate you for this. No, those just cannot go together.
So liberating. This is the truth. We're having all these feelings at the same time. And you can't hate someone without loving them. You can't be angry without feeling a real connection or a desire.
Yeah, that was really big for me, to be able to know I can love someone and feel angry with them at the same time. And that doesn't change the love. And I think when we want someone to be able to be present and hear our anger and not automatically get into defensive mode, that's also the best way to share it. Is I love you for this. I want connection with you. And I also feel angry about this.
Yeah.
It took me some time to get that.
Yeah, fair enough. The expression of anger, and like we're talking about clearing being something we can do for ourselves alone without the other person. The same thing can be true of anger. Like for me, it was easier. I could hold anybody's anger about anything as long as it wasn't something to do with me. That's when I would crumble. But my capacity to withhold someone's big passionate, to hold it, not withhold it, their big passionate energy is big. I have a big capacity for that. But making it personal is what made it impossible.
That part is huge. because I'm glad you talked about that, because what I wanted to say is that in order to sit and hear someone's anger and be willing to be in it with them and be regulated enough to bring an open heart and an open mind, you have to not take it personally. And I didn't know how to not take it personally for the longest time. And that took a lot of practice to see that someone can love you and care about you and see all these beautiful things about you and feel angry about something. And it's not about my worth or lovability. It's just that this thing doesn't work for them or it hurt them.
Yeah. Well, I think anger can be expressed impersonally, and so is easier to receive. We're going to have personal beefs with people that we want to clear with them, but also it's perfectly legitimate to say to a group of friends, I'm going to deliver a furious monologue right now from a movie I watched, and then express all of that anger energy in that way, and you will actually feel relief.
Yes. The thing is that I feel like we've been conditioned to not know how to say, I feel angry with you to the actual person.
Yeah.
And because we don't think that's an option, then we shut it all down. And we don't even look for what these other ways of expressing and moving that anger energy are. We don't know that they exist. And for a lot of us, for me, like I didn't see healthy expression of anger growing up. So I didn't know it was a possibility. I just saw that every time anger was expressed, it was coupled with shame. And so it was a hurting of someone.
Do you think they knew they were angry?
I don't even know. I don't know if it's like cultural, this norm. I think I need to expose myself to more Cantonese speaking, like Chinese people of that generation. But what I noticed growing up, and I feel sad for them and for myself, is I've never actually heard two adults of my parents' generation have a nice, friendly sounding conversation in Cantonese. Ever. Not one.
Right.
It always has this passive aggressive tone, this angry tone. I'm not saying that the whole culture is like that or everybody's like that. I'm saying I was never exposed to it. And then I realized like Chinese was my first language until I went to school when I was 5. And even up until I was 13 or so, that was the main language spoken at home. And I think to myself, to have never have heard any adults speaking in your mother tongue in a way that's warm and kind with each other, that can't be healthy or good or helpful.
That's a good thing to put to the audience. Do we have anybody with Cantonese speaking parents? Of what would this generation be? Baby boomers?
Yeah, my parents are like in their early 70s, late 60s.
Yeah, let us
I've
know.
never heard it. And it's funny, there's this G handle that I follow. I think it's called Made with Lao. And it's this older Chinese man, and he just shows videos of him cooking Chinese food. And it's so healing for me to watch my culture and the food being embraced and celebrated. It's a big reclaiming piece for me. But the thing I wanted to share about this is that other people who follow this account have noted, you guys are so kind to each other as a family. What the F is that? I've never seen that before. And so it's really healing to be able to hear the sounds of that, the sounds of love, the sounds of curiosity, the sounds of appreciation in your mother tongue. Even if it's not directed at myself, like just to hear it, my whole nervous system's, oh, that sounds really nice.
Yeah. Favorite things that you've ever told me that you've done is going to Google Translation app and typing in phrases that you wanted to hear from your parents to be translated into Cantonese.
Yeah, that actually wasn't that long ago, because I've been working with clients, and some of them, their mother tongue is a different language, even though they're very well versed in English and they would consider English pretty much their primary language. But when I asked, I said, was there another language spoken as like the language of your childhood? And people say yes. And I'll ask them, like, would you be willing to try these prompts in that language and see how it feels? And it's so powerful to see what happens when people start speaking up for themselves in their mother tongue.
Yes.
And start saying what they needed to hear from their parents in their mother tongue. It's always a very powerful and emotional experience. And so I thought to myself, okay, we have technology these days. Let me go to Google Translate. Let me type in the things that I wish I would have heard from my parents as a little girl, or I wish I would hear from them today, that maybe they would say them today if I asked them to, but they certainly didn't say them to me growing up, or even if they didn't outnumber the criticisms and the comparisons. And so like they didn't register in the bank of my mind. And I would type in things like, we love you so much. We're so proud of you. Or I'm so sorry that hurt you. And I wish I could have done it differently. And since then, my parents have said stuff like that. But what I realized is you don't get sick of hearing it. I don't get sick of hearing it. So I'd press play on the computer and I was like, let's just see how it feels. And it felt good. It felt sweet. It was a little robotic and I could have a laugh about that. But I think there's something powerful about allowing ourselves to hear the things we needed to hear as children.
Yeah, it's incredibly healing. Doing the things is healing. This is the same, remember the experience in women's group of asking for people to tell you what you wanted to hear and the things you wanted to be praised for. And it feels so silly because you're like, well, it doesn't matter if I've asked you for it. It doesn't really work. But in fact, it does. It completely does.
It blew my mind. This was actually a landmark exercise I remember doing years ago. And it was like, turn to your neighbor who you don't know them and tell them the things you'd like to be acknowledged for. I'm like, okay. And then your neighbor is going to sit there and acknowledge you for those exact same things that you just asked for acknowledgement for. And in my mind, I thought, like, how could this make a difference? But I was like willing to try. So I sat there and I did this exercise and I was amazed at how good it felt. And what that taught me was, one, we need to practice. We need to learn how to ask for what we need and ask for especially what we want to be acknowledged for. And we have to give other people the opportunity to give that to us and to learn to receive it and to hear and let ourselves feel it deep inside our bodies. And that, it just really surprised me. This person knew nothing about me. They were uttering words. But for my nervous system, they made a difference. And I think if you get all sciencey about it, it's interpersonal neurobiology. Dr. Dan Siegel talks all about it. It's the power of hearing those things that we really need to hear to feel heard and understood and seen. And all of a sudden, your nervous system shifts. So I can let down. I'm being seen now.
I think there's something really more interpersonal than science has even measured yet about that, about how our energies interact around these things. Someone's giving you not just the words, but the energy of that. They're feeling it in their body. They're sharing that with you because you're in a space together, presumably, exchanging energy. I think that's, it's co-regulating.
Yeah. It's great because it's a pretty simple thing to do.
It is. A lot of what we talk about is really simple things to do.
And what I've noticed is, like, for example, I've done this practice. We've done this practice in women's group and led it, and we've done it in our one-on-one work with clients. And what I noticed initially when I ask people, what is it that you want to be acknowledged for? Let's use the prompt, something I want to be acknowledged for is. And they either get all shy and giggly, Or they're like, I don't know. And it's like silent for a while. And I'm like, that's okay. We can just be with the silence and feel your butt on the chair. And then all of a sudden it begins and the floodgates open. And they realize, I want to be acknowledged for so many things. And that is such a beautiful thing to witness for me, for someone to sit there and claim, I want to be acknowledged for these things. Right? And in saying, I want to be acknowledged for these things, we're actually acknowledging ourselves.
Yeah.
That's happening too.
Which is beautiful, and also can bring up a lot of shame and grief, a lot of realizing that you haven't asked for what you need ever, or that you've never been receiving what you needed, that your life hasn't been about all of these things that you've needed. There's so many layers to it.
So many. And the beauty of being able to speak these things out loud and then for them to stir up all this old buried stuff is it gives us an opportunity to grieve those things. Because they matter. When you've walked through the majority of your life never speaking up for your needs, it makes sense that there would be a deep sadness that comes with that. And maybe some anger and a whole bunch of other feelings.
Can I put you on the spot right now? I am feeling this, which is why I am bringing it up. This has come to my mind, so I'm saying it out loud.
Okay.
Will you walk us through a process of noticing shame and sitting with it, being with the feeling of shame?
Yeah, okay.
The feeling of needing to make an apology. So what I'm getting at is when we notice that we've done something that we need to apologize for, that we want to apologize for,
Okay.
how do we sit with those feelings and bring it forward into our life?
Right. Okay. So let's feel our butts on the chair or your feet on the ground and notice your breath. And creating healthy, nourishing touch and rewiring our relationship with touch, I find is really integral to this work. So I always offer, if it feels good or comforting to add some touch, please do. The prompt that comes to mind is something I've been afraid to apologize for is. And just notice what comes up for you. And I encourage you to say that prompt out loud. Something I've been afraid to apologize for is. Just finish that sentence and give it a pause. We don't need all the story, the details of the story. Just one thing you've been afraid to apologize for. And let your body feel that. Steph, just let me know. You don't have to share what yours is. If you don't want to, you can if you want. But I want you to let me know when you feel connected to the body feeling of, oh, this is the thing that I've been afraid to apologize for.
Yeah, I'm connected.
Yeah. Can you tell us where you feel that in your body and what kind of sensation that is?
Yeah. So it's everything from my belly button up to where my hand is on my chest, just above my heart.
Okay. And would you connect that with a feeling or is it just sensation right now?
No, it's a feeling. It's shame. So the sensations for me in my body of shame are like a fullness in my midsection, and it's a little hot and tingly and round, and it crawls up into my heart, that kind of sick, cold feeling.
So let's play with this. Hello, shame.
Hello, shame.
And just let your hands, if it feels comfortable, be on those spots with some tenderness and love. Hello, shame. I feel you.
Hello, shame. I feel you.
And I'm learning to be with you.
I'm learning to be with you.
And just notice your breath.
I can tell you that months ago, I would have been able to produce these sentences without crying. Years ago, I wouldn't have been able to at all. This is maybe the first time I'm saying these words that I feel the depth of connection that I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And it feels like secure instead of trembly.
Right. So just let yourself be in that. Enjoy that space. Acknowledge the progress that you've made. And then we're going to add another prompt or another sentence, which is, it hasn't always felt safe to apologize.
It hasn't always felt safe to apologize.
And as I learn to hold myself through my shame,
it hasn't always felt safe to apologize. And as I learn to hold myself through my shame,
I trust that apologizing will become easier.
I trust that apologizing will become easier.
And I want you just to notice, feel your butt again, feel your hand on your body. Just notice what that feels like in your body to say those things. Does it feel true? Does a part of you want to protest? Is there a yeah, but? Let me know what you notice.
It's a relief physically, like I feel more open and expansive. And I know that I have no intention of apologizing for this thing.
Great.
But it still feels relieving and an acknowledgement in my body.
So let's bring this in as well. Okay. At this time, I don't think I'm going to apologize.
I'm not going to apologize.
And I'm learning that's okay too.
And I'm learning that's okay too.
And if I ever want to change my mind, I can.
And if I ever want to change my mind, I can. Ooh, there's a little snarky little snarkerson in there that is flaring up.
What is the snarky?
I can change my mind if I want to, but I'm not going to. Screw you.
And I'm learning to let that part of me be there too.
I'm learning to let that part of me be there too. Yeah. So simple.
How do we expect that we could apologize from a genuine place if we're just constantly shaming ourselves? So we have to practice holding our shame with compassion and trusting the process, that as I hold myself with more tenderness, as I give myself permission to feel all these things and believe all these things to be true, that those layers of armor will slowly come down to expose that tender heart, the part of us that wants to apologize.
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Thanks, Gigi.
You're welcome.
Just at an hour. Is there anything you wanted to talk about before we sign off, before we do another body practice?
Yeah, there's one prompt I think I want to give all of us, which is, I want to apologize to myself for.
Heavy.
And so that's a seed planting for something to explore. Maybe something comes very naturally and quickly when you hear that prompt. Maybe a lightness that comes with that prompt, and maybe it's a heaviness. And is there a willingness to hold yourself through that?
Yeah, I want you guys to really notice like the reaction, the response your body gives you when you hear a prompt like this. I know when I began this work, I would have just been like, okay, cool, there's the prompt. I've written it down. Now I'm going to go follow the prompt. I'm going to ask. And it would be this robotic, disconnected thing because I didn't know I was not connected to my body. I didn't know how to do it. So when you hear this sentence said to you, something I want to apologize to myself for is, notice if you feel disconnected from this sentence, if you feel anything in your body at all, if it feels big or overwhelming, if you feel sad, if you feel like you're going to burst into tears, that's usually my go-to. So before it would have been by rote, I'm just writing this down, I'm just going through the motions, and then it became, oh, I'm bursting into tears at everything.
Yeah, and you're allowed to choose your pace and your process. If you hear that prompt and you never want to hear it again, that's okay. If you hear it, you want to write it down, great. If you don't, also great. The reason for sharing these prompts is purely to plant a seed for us, that it's even possible to want to or to be able to bring some tenderness and care to ourselves for how hard we've been on ourselves. That's all. And we can work with that at a pace that feels okay.
Beautiful.
I think a body practice to tie this all together is a holding. So we'll take our right hand and place it just under your left arm. Your left hand either on the shoulder, your right shoulder, or on your right arm. And just adjusting it until it feels like a pleasant hold, a warm holding of yourself. And notice what happens to your breath as you feel that holding and that warmth. And if it doesn't feel good, give yourself the permission to adjust it until it does. And see if it feels good to end with a little squeeze. I like little squeezes to my hugs.
Me too. Oh, thanks, Gigi. Great episode. Okay, so that's it for now then, yeah?
That's all for now.
That's all for now. So follow, subscribe, and if anything we've said here today has helped you, please share it with somebody that you care about. We'll see you next time. Bye.